Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm Hugh Stevens. I'm Managing Director of LiveRamp in the UK. And in a small change to the advertised bill, we've added a little bit of a bridging title to what we've got here. So solving the data-driven marketing conundrum, bridging the gap between online and offline. And when I think about that, I think about the world in the offline of data, where CRM exists, where loyalty exists, and the online world where we have historically, and I think quite traditionally, used native data that sits within media platforms. I think about technologies where we're talking about MarTech versus or combined with ad tech, and I think about people. And I think the teams and the skill sets that we have in our businesses from an online and offline perspective have historically maybe not always been joined together, and that's quite often because the data is difficult to join together. So one of the things that we do at LiveRamp is help bridge that gap. And I thought it was really interesting what Tracy led with, and I wrote it down, so you'll have to excuse me while I just look at my phone. She talked about the things that CACI are doing, do amazing things with data to connect brands and people and places to deliver value to customers. And I think we're not far off from a LiveRamp point of view of what we're trying to do. We're helping innovative brands build enduring brand business value through the power of data collaboration. And when we talk about data collaboration, it's about who is going to actually realize the value of that data and why are they going to realize that value. So we'll come on to talk a little bit about those brands at the bottom of the page, but everything we do is in the people-based world. So it's thinking about the identity of an individual and how we can connect them in multiple places. Today, we do that in a pretty good way a lot of the time in the CRM space, in our direct and our owned channels. And what we do is we help really sort of evangelize around how that can be used in multiple different places to improve the relevance of what we're doing for brands. And ultimately allowing consumers and brands to better connect across many different areas for their brands and products. And I think Florence talked a little bit about this from a Shiseido perspective with Meta and what they're doing there and all the work that they've been doing with CACI. And I think that that's really just kind of like, how do we kind of scale that and make it bigger? So why are we here? CACI is media activation partner, I suppose, from our point of view. When I think about what Tracy led with, I think we're really well connected. We're the technology that enables a lot of what can happen with data, and especially with the work that many of you are doing with CACI. So when you look at the brands on the bottom of this page, some might suggest that actually there's some limited opportunities with some of these brands because of the CPG approach. And I think what Florence has talked about today is illustrated really nicely that there's a massive opportunity with data. And we're seeing that with some of the brands that we see here. Boots, dunnhumby, maybe Costa, maybe more data-rich from a CRM point of view, from a direct consumer point of view, and where we're seeing loyalty really come to the fore now as the advent of media, of retail media, is really coming to the fore. And so with Boots, with their Boots Media Group proposition, dunnhumby obviously being in that position for many, many years, we're seeing that actually there's more data coming to market and there's many more places in which people want to use that data in order to power their audience and customer strategies. But what does that actually all mean about what we do? And so what I thought I'd start with is a case study. I know quite often we leave case studies to the end, but I thought actually just to try and bring it to life a little bit in a fairly simple way around how we help brands. This is an example of a client of ours, British Gas, who really had very much with looking at how they can use their first-party data across many different places. Their initial engagement was thinking about how can I actually use an exclusion use case in media? So it's very much going, we know that people who buy a boiler from us and have it installed can only do that a certain number of times across a time period because it is just the nature of it. You're not going to replace a boiler that often. So why would we pay for media against people who we know we've installed a boiler for recently, or at least within the last 5 to 7 years? So their hypothesis was that they thought that by making that exclusion process across as much of their media as possible, they could actually create media savings they could then reinvest back into their acquisition and performance strategies. So our task was then to help them shift their first-party data through a secure and pseudonymized process with our identity matching and our graph into our Safe Haven product. And our Safe Haven product really then puts the keys in the hands of their teams, whether that be data science, whether that be their media agencies, or whether that be the data providers that they work with, in order that they can actually do a lot of what they're doing in the CRM space, but actually activate it in the digital space. And then enable them to push those audiences safely and securely into the platforms of choice where they're actually driving their media assets. There's a line that's missing from this, which is the measurement piece, and I'll come on to talk a little bit about that later. But really, it's a key process is actually then going, well, okay, so what? I've managed to exclude my customers. What can I do with it? So in order to kind of get the big number out first, in their first year, they saw 10% worth of savings across media, which they then reinvested back into their media. So from a client perspective, they weren't just looking to kind of reabsorb that back into the business and take it as savings. They were seeing this as an investment in the technology and the process of using identity in order to exclude the right people, in order to drive a saving in their budget, which they could then create greater return on investment. They saw a 33% uplift in conversion rates with that reinvestment of that data. And then from a point of view of switching from what they were doing previously, which is a fairly manual process, taking data and pushing it into platforms, to what we were able to offer, we saw a 10x increase in our ability to actually connect to their customers within platforms. So all of these things together under a fairly simple use case, and we've moved on to other use cases now, really sort of underpinned their thinking around how they could use their own customer data and what they know about their customers in order to inform their media strategies. But why do we think an addressable strategy is valuable? So ultimately, we're trying to get to the needs of the customer and the needs of your business. It's the age-old adage of right time, right place, right offer. And so this contextually relevant content, knowing who your customer is, all the great work that you do in segmenting your customers, and then knowing what you're putting in front of them from the right content from an ownership point of view, i.e. your owned channels, we can now connect into the digital channels. Trying to make that timely as well. So everything that we do is driven by the moments that we're seeing and the interactions that we're seeing with our customers, whether that be connected through your call center or whether that be connected through your digital interactions through website. Trying to make it consistent so that whatever you're doing is you're putting those constant messages in front of the consumer which are consistent across channels, which leads you to ideally the seamless kind of activation of an omni-channel strategy, and then ultimately measurable. I think one of the key things about an addressable strategy and about using data which is driven by identity is that you're able to know who you're pushing into a media platform, and therefore when you see that transaction come back into your business and you're able to log it, you're able to say that you know that that audience has driven that impact on your business from a sales perspective. But it doesn't happen overnight, and I think this is a really key point, and I think James is going to come on a little bit to talk about this in the next session, which is really good that he follows on here. The consumers are demanding. We're seeing, and I'm afraid that my numeric retention is not great here, 66% of customers, according to a Salesforce survey, are asking for the content that they see to be unique and meeting their expectations. So the more that you can personalize, which is another sort of set of phrases that were used early on, the entire journey with that customer, and the more that you can personalize and create more relevant moments for them, the more likely it is that you're going to actually deliver a better customer experience. 52%, according to the same survey, want personalized offerings. So they want to know that you've listened to the information that they're giving to you. They want to know that those interactions that they're having with your business, no matter where, are ideally being threaded through the other communications that they're having with you. So we see that consumers actually kind of, when they're actually being asked to give permission to use their data, that they actually are expecting it to then be used, according to these surveys. Quite often, we're working in a world where the technology is either legacy or going through a change. We have new CTOs coming in, we have new CIOs, we have new regulation. So actually, sometimes it's quite difficult to see the big picture around what we can do with data. which is why we tend to think about what are the small steps that we can take to begin with. And I think that British Gas example is a really good one. The hypotheses around excluding customers to begin with and building confidence in the use of first-party data was absolutely key there. So what we're going to do is just come on to talk about three different areas around how to manage data in an omni-channel way, how the technology supports that and enables it, developing an addressable strategy, what's out there in the ecosystem, and how can you work with CACI in order to support that, and then accurately measuring the impact of those different distributions of audiences into different places. We see the technology as the enabler. We're a technology business, and it's very easy for us to say we've got all the answers, but actually it takes partnership and collaboration. It needs your teams to work together in order to understand how this is going to manifest as return on investment to your business. And it's absolutely essential that your strategy around your customer data and around the data that you're using in an addressable fashion can come into an environment which can be used by the right stakeholders. So when we think about audience building, think about those teams in your business who are maybe currently working on CRM to actually work within the technology to build those same audiences or equally connect CRM audiences through our technology into the places that it needs to be connected to. Combining it with the data sets, and I'll come on to this a little bit more, the data sets that are important to you, that you've either licensed or that you have appended to your customer data in order to segment them and utilize similar methodologies in the media channels. The controlled activation piece, again, I'll talk a little bit more in a moment, is how do you then actually scale that out into as many channels as possible and create that addressable reach that we're looking for to connect to as many customers as you possibly can and enable your media spend to actually drive greater return on investment. We're seeing fantastic results with a number of our clients, people like Boots, where they've actually gone from a very small number of channels 2, 3, 4 years ago to now they're kind of using about 20-odd different channels, and we're seeing about 50+% of their media spend is actually going against their first-party data. The return on investment they're getting by putting their customer first at the center of what their media strategy is significant. I've talked about measurement, bringing those different pieces together. We're in a fortunate position that we have unique relationships with people like Meta, but then equally from the point of view of the open web world, where we can actually bring in log-level data back and actually provide measurement on campaigns' performance back connected into your transactional data. So this is something that we can do either as a managed service in some instances, because we're limited to what we can do, or actually set up within our data science environment and empower your data scientists to actually run that approach. And then from an insights point of view, absolutely essential that we think about the insights that you're gathering on your customers yourselves, the data that maybe you're licensing and enhancing on your own customer data, and how you can, again, put that in the hands of your data science team, your insights team, or your agencies in order to enable more of that data and more of that knowledge to be used across more of your marketing spend. So as we start to think about, at a high level, the data sets that we work with and that we see as being useful for a lot of our clients, we kind of break it down into these 4 areas. So thinking about our data strategy, first-party data are absolutely critical, but increasingly we're seeing a lot of those data sets that have been used in the offline space actually now being available and utilized much more formally across a holistic strategy for data and for customer in the digital space. So YouGov and Kantar, well known, again was talked about earlier, and we see that the attitudinal behavioural data that comes from that is still very valuable in deciphering the segmentation that you want to put forward into media. Working with our friends at CACI, the Fresco, the new Acorn release and Ocean being key sort of underpinning segmentations that will create differentiation in the way that you think about the demographic of the consumers that you're going after. And then as we start to look more kind of what I would call specific into kind of industry level data sets, Circana or previously IRI, if people are not up to date with that name change, MasterCard, CarWow, for example, all data sets that we work with in order to enable more insights, much more at an industry level or a sector level to support your understanding of how those customers are interacting with your brands, but then equally across other areas as well. And then I mentioned retail media. This is not just limited at the moment to grocery. This is increasingly going across many different areas. And the partnership that we have with Tesco Dunnhumby, amongst others, to enable those retailer insights into the marketplace. They're doing it themselves through their products, but we have a joint venture with them around measurement, which can enable you to look at the sales lift in the right categories from a CPG point of view in Tesco stores. So this is really the kind of the end-to-end of what we help enable. Again, most of our clients are coming to us with that first-party kind of, how do we use our first-party more? But actually, when we think about more of the sort of CPG or maybe automotive, and to a certain extent, that first-party data is not necessarily as well organized and well structured as it might be. So therefore, they're partnering with other data providers in order to support their ambitions. From a CACI point of view, they bring the great segmentation that we've talked about this morning that Sue and the team have worked through. And we can bring that into our platform, enable the segmentation, enable the right personas of people within your organization, access to it through, and build custom audiences and lookalikes in order to scale out into media. You then move into the media activation piece, and I think this is really a key part. It really covers all bases. We know that there are differing match rates and differing connectivities with the different partners. But actually, when you get into a full strategy around how you're going to use data much more formally in an addressable way into these, it's thinking about what's the total addressable reach across all of these different channels. And I think, when we look at programmatic and what Google announced last week, they are definitely sticking to their cookieless timeframe of end of next year. So actually, I think we're going to see a lot of kind of evolution in the programmatic world with that confirmation this last week, and especially, and there's a logo missing from here, which Will, I'm sure, will berate me for, the Xandr platform, which is already enabled from a cookieless point of view with our identifiers, as is MediaMath, and we can also connect into the Amazon and the Google ecosystem as well. But I think the key thing is to question and ask yourselves is, what am I trying to do? Is it awareness, acquisition, retention? Am I looking at churned audiences, or am I trying to think about a much more holistic strategy which kind of connects into an omni-channel approach? So I think those bits on the end there are really, before we get into how do you do it, I think it's actually really important that we think about what are the strategies that we're trying to execute upon, and then ideally, build that in as a team internally on your side as to how you connect the people within your business together, insight analytics, data science, media, and your agencies. It's a real partnership when that comes together, which can be very valuable. So a slightly contrived journey that I'm going to talk you through now, just as the last couple of slides wrap up. This is obviously not how consumers behave, but it's the easiest way we can do it in a sort of linear sense. Sky and Google, we can get audiences into. We know that we can take a segmentation, we can take the knowledge that you've got on your customers or on your prospects and enable them those environments. So if we think about a buyer who's in market, they see a TV ad, they then go into Google. We're trying to kind of manipulate that environment so that the right advertising is going in front of the right segment, the right audience, and then ultimately they visit your brand site. We can capture that information as well and connect it back into a holistic audience. There are some places where we can get data back and some places where we can't. Week 2, obviously, people discuss with their families what they're going to buy, especially when you see what the case study is at the end. And then we see that they go into the publisher environment, the Mirror and OK, and they're targeted with display ads because they've logged into that environment, and we can therefore see that they are that identifier. They come back to site and then they add to basket, and then we have the conversion through the social channels. Again, all of these places that we can help get more of your audiences and segments and intelligence into them, which currently sit in the offline ecosystem. I always talk about buying yogurt with my wife, we've got a lovely little case study here for you, which actually comes out of our French team who are working very closely with the Carrefour organisation, big supermarket. And when they actually started kind of thinking about those audiences and how they could actually connect them into multiple different environments, they did a whole load of testing about the right balance of different media partners. But they saw from an e-commerce point of view on the on the Carrefour site, the 22% increase in their e-commerce conversions, and overall a growth of revenue of 24% against this product which they were bringing to market. So I think it's a really positive story to sort of look at how can data actually flow through all of those different areas. But then I'm going to leave you with a couple of takeouts, and I'm not going to talk technology or anything like that. I'm just going to leave you with a couple of things. So we are thinking of ourselves as a collaboration business from the point of view of data. How can we bring the right people together, the right companies, in order to help them collaborate across data as an opportunity? This is already happening. The retail media space is exploding right now. I think there's a long way to go from the point of view of evidencing exactly how that comes to fruition. But I ask you to think about who could you be working with? How can you get more from your partnerships with people like CACI, with your agencies, with your technology providers, and how can you start thinking about that, how that comes together for the better good of your customers and your business? Your customer strategy can be truly omni-channel. I know that sounds like an obvious thing, but actually that Boots case study of over 3 years, they've gone to that scale. It's absolutely critical to their strategy now. They think about every single touch point. It's bled through everything that they do. First-party data, knowing the customer, applying more intelligence into what they're doing at every touch point is absolutely critical for them. So I would say make sure that if you're in the media world, you go and talk to your internal CRM and your insights people. If you're in the insights world, in the CRM world, go and talk to your media people and see how you can collaborate together and really kind of apply that omni-channel approach. Again, think big, start small, scale fast. The resource is already there to drive more value today. I think the evidence of you guys probably being in this room and working with CACI suggests that you're probably invested in some form in technology and data. So, organisationally, how can you evolve in order to get more out of that? That is me done.